and their support has been so helpful. I'd also like to thank the team at Department for Justice for all their support and information, but also to all members of this House, particularly those from the opposition who supported this bill and who recognise the importance and the difference this will make to prisons up and down the country, and particularly for prison officers who do such sterling work under very difficult circumstances and who for this bill will make a great difference. Members may know that I inherited this bill, so I want to put on record my thanks to the Right Honourable Member for Tatton, both for her previous work in championing this bill, but also for trusting me with the responsibility for ensuring its safe passage, and I hope I have repaid her confidence. I also want to acknowledge the groundbreaking work of the Honourable Member for Mole Valley for steering the original 2012 Act through Parliament. It could be argued that because we are revisiting the 2012 Act only 6 years later, that in some way it was deficient, but nothing could be further from the truth. The 2012 Act was an important and far-sighted contribution to the fight against the scourge of illicit mobile phones. The reason it has proved necessary to legislate again so soon is because of the sheer speed of technological change and the sheer scale of the problem posed by illicit mobile phones in our prisons. Figures provide a stark illustration of the scale of the problem. In 2011, just a year before the 2012 Act was introduced, about 7,000 illicit mobile phones and SIM cards were found in prisons in England and Wales. By 2016, the figure was nearly 20,000 mobile phones and SIM cards. And last year, in 2017, this had risen to 23,656 mobile phone and SIM cards. I will give way.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way and congratulate her on how far she's come with her bill so far. Last night I was talking with some mums whose young people had been caught up in crime, and they were horrified to tell me that people are using mobile phones to continue their criminal activity in jail, but also to continue their thrall over the young people that they have groomed. Does she, like me, share concern that this is allowed to continue?
Thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and she's quite right, and I will go on to explain how these mobile phones are used, and indeed they are used to continue crime within our prison service. But to reiterate the fact that last year 23,656 mobile phones were found, that's nearly 65 a day in our prisons. In my own constituency of Lewes, 184 mobile phones and 80 SIM cards were found at HMP Lewes last year. And having visited the prison regularly, meeting with prison officers and the Governor, I've heard first-hand of the implications, and as the Honourable Lady has pointed out, illegal mobile phone use presents a serious risk to the security of our prison, as well as to the safety of the public. Mobile phones in prisons are being used for a range of criminal purposes in these institutions, including commissioning serious violence, harassing victims, and continuing involvement in extremist activity and organised crime. Access to mobile phones is also strongly associated with drug supply and violence in our prisons, so it's a serious problem indeed. It may be argued, therefore, that the prison service should be better at stopping mobiles entering our prisons in the first place. But as the previous Secretary for State for Justice made clear in a speech to Reform in December last year, technological advances have been harnessed by some manufacturers with the clear intention of circumventing prison security measures. Technological advances have made it possible to manufacture phones so small and containing so little metal that they can be concealed internally and make it very difficult to detect using existing screening machines. Phones have been marketed as Beat the Boss, which means beat the body orifice security scanner, in use in receptions in our prisons. However, just as technology can be harnessed for illicit ends, we can also elicit its support to improve effectiveness of the response to the problem. Public communication providers such as mobile phone operators have been at the forefront of rapid technological development in mobile communications. Only this week, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have witnessed here in this place a mobile phone make its maiden speech during defence questions. There is no end to the possibilities.
Give way.
I will give way.
I thank the member for giving way. She talks about a mobile phone giving its maiden speech to an offence statement. Does she recall that when we had the second reading of this bill, I had a rather bizarre interruption to my own speech, better known as a mobile phone fighting back against this bill?
The honourable member is quite right. We did have mobile phones actually trying to fight against this bill during second reading. The changes in this bill are designed to directly elicit the specialist knowledge and support and expertise of mobile phone operators to combat the use of illicit mobile phones in our prisons, young offenders institutions, secure training centres and secure colleges. Importantly, and as I made clear at earlier stages in the bill's consideration, it will ensure that there is a line of accountability for their activity that is clearly set down in primary legislation. Under the 2012 Act, a public communications provider can become involved in interference activity in our prison, but only as acting as agent of the Governor or Director, who has been authorised to carry out the interference activity by the Secretary of State. By providing for them to be authorised directly, this bill enables them to bring their expertise directly to bear, all the time governed by a clear legal framework. Existing safeguards in the 2012 Act will apply to authorised public communications provider, just as they already apply to authorised governors. And like an authorised governor, any public communications provider will have to comply with the directions given to them by the Secretary of State. And the responsibility for deciding about retention and disclosure of information obtained following the interference activity conducted in a prison will continue to rest with the Governor or Director of that institution. This will apply even if the information has been obtained following interference activity conducted by an authorised public communications provider. Now, I've had two main questions, Madam Deputy Speaker, raised during the progress of this bill. The first has been from residents, particularly from residents in Lewis and my constituency, who may be concerned that they live so close to the prison that their mobile phones may be interfered with. And I understand that there is a case of genuine customers could be erroneously disconnected from mobile phone networks if a phone is incorrectly identified as being used in a prison without authorisation. However, Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service will calibrate and test its approach, including any technology, process and infrastructure, with the mobile phone network operators and Ofcom to ensure that only those handsets that are being used in a prison without authorisation will be identified and stopped from working. And the second point that has been raised by many members in the House as a concern is about the lack of contact with prisoners, genuine contact with them and their families. And as Conservative members who are part of the Strengthening Families Manifesto have identified through the Lord Farmer review, we do know that maintaining contact with family members is crucial to reduce reoffending. And in fact, by maintaining family contact, you can reduce reoffending rates by something like 38%. So it is important that genuine contact is maintained for prisoners, but that doesn't mean that they need to use mobile phones to do that. And the government has made great efforts in tackling this, and increasing legitimate access to phones and encouraging prisoners to have more contact with their families is important and part of the government's overall objective to improve rehabilitation. The deployment of in-cell telephony to 14 prisons has been completed and will make more calls accessible. Tariffs have also been reduced at these sites to make the calls more affordable, and 6 more prisons will have in-cell telephony deployed by the end of July. In-cell telephony gives prisoners much greater opportunity to maintain contact with their families, as it is not affected by time allowed of cell or lack of privacy. So finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, one final point before I invite the House to give the bill a third reading. This bill is not tied to any one technological solution, but instead it sets out a legal framework to enable more direct and independent involvement by authorised public communications providers. This approach should provide an element of cover against further and rapid technological advances in the mobile phone communication sphere, advances which are almost certain to happen given the speed with which this high-tech field has developed. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read for a third time.